today. Today was the best first day reaction for the S&P 500 post any election day in history. Just to give you some sense there, the S&P up 2.2% and the
I'm placing an order to buy euro at 117.183. Order placed to buy euro at 117.183. Let's see. Maybe it will get executed right now. No, probably not. Okay, some movement. Okay, position opened at 117.183.
In the after hours, just came out with their earnings, and I'm looking at the forecast, which is what a lot of investors care about. First quarter revenue, looking at 7.8 to 8.6 billion. The estimate, Sarah, that's out there is 7.2 billion. So you can see why investors are kind of upbeat about it. The CEO saying markets are stronger than thought. Says emerging market phone demand rebounded. We've got the CEO making some conversations in a phone interview, talking with our Bloomberg News team. Fourth quarter adjusted EPS was $1.45. That was 25 cents better than forecast. So again, let me just do a quick check because I love this space. I mean, Qualcomm's up 46%. That whole semi space we know has been on fire.
And I'm checking this right now with the gain that we are seeing right now in after hours of about 2%. This would deposit Qualcomm at a new record high. So an unbelievable run for Qualcomm. Certainly a different type of tech stock than the likes of Amazon, Microsoft, Apple, Facebook that really led the gains today. But still, tech across the board has just been crushing it this year.
Well, what's everybody saying about tech? I mean, go back a couple of days ago, last week, everybody was giving up, after tech earnings, and then all of a sudden the tech trade, okay, we're all in on it now.
Now everyone's saying, look, you can't bet against tech. On the one side, it's the reflation trade that we mentioned. If we're not seeing the reflation trade, and I will point out that the last I looked, the Russell 2000 actually closed in the red today. So quite an unbelievable gap between that and the NASDAQ 100. Also, value today had its worst day if you measure it by looking at the Russell 1000 indexes. Worst day versus growth since 2001. So that growth trade is certainly back on, at least for today. You have the reflation side of the trade. On top of that, also the idea that if you do have a split Congress, if you still do have Republicans in the Senate, which is expected now, then maybe it's likely that we won't actually see too much antitrust regulation come down to the pipeline to break up big tech.
So, kiddo, here's your Russell. It was up 1% at a tie, down almost 1% at its low. It ended just up a hair, 0.05%, so call it flat on the day, the Russell.
Flat on the day, but when you say flat on the day compared to a day when the NASDAQ 100 is up 4.4%. I mean, that is quite the doozy. I mean, that's a very large underperformance.
Yeah, exactly. All right, good stuff as always. Get some sleep tonight. I hope
you
too.
Get
some sleep. All right, Sarah Ponczak, our Bloomberg News cross-asset reporter, joining us, talk about the close here. You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week, and this is Bloomberg.
All right, Dave, you're up.
Hi, my name is Dave.
Wilson, where are you? Wilson!
Just what do you think you're doing, Dave?
We're going for a price on Wilson.
Open up the door, it's Dave.
Who?
Dave.
Hey, Mr. Wilson!
Hey, Mr. Wilson, in a generally overall upward moving market day when it came to equities, you actually found a name that saw some selling.
I sure did, and took a hit because of it. It's Tabula Rasa Healthcare. Now, Tabula Rasa is Latin for blank slate, or if you like, new beginning. That's how the company defines it anyway, the new beginning idea. It's a healthcare software provider whose products help manage risks related to medications and handle back office services. Tabula Rasa was founded in 2009 and went public in 2016. The ticker is TRHC. Now, the shares surged more than eightfold from their initial price to set a record in September 2018. Since then, they've given back most of the gain. Tabula Rasa's retreat accelerated after third quarter results came out late yesterday. The company reported its first adjusted loss and a first decline in revenue since going public. Analysts expected a profit and sales growth. Based on the average estimates in a Bloomberg survey, Tabula Rasa cited coronavirus-related delays in 2 health plan contracts, among other issues. The results sent the company's shares to their lowest price since January 2018. They closed with a loss of more than 16%.
Yeah, interesting to see that name. And just a reminder that even in a market that seems like everything's heading higher, it's still individuals, company and stock stories here, Dave.
Yeah, absolutely. And in this case, it's more of the same. Tabula rasa now down 36% for the year.
Wow, that's a really, really big really big pain to the downside there. Dave Wilson, I do wonder how you think, we're going to continue to see these headlines when it comes to election states, legal cases. I mean, how does that continue to impact the markets here?
Well, it's going to be something that people are obviously paying a lot of attention to. But as long as sort of the scenario as it's laid out at this point, with Biden being ahead in the count, doesn't change in any meaningful way with all these legal challenges,
right?
Then you have to wonder whether investors kind of take it in stride and go on.
All right, Dave Wilson,
at this point, they know there are going to be issues that come up, but it's not like it really changes the equation.
Dave, I got to take everybody to Joe Biden. He's at the Chase Center in Wilmington, Delaware, live. Let's listen in.
Yesterday, once again proved that democracy is the heartbeat of this nation. Just as it has been the heartbeat of this nation for 2 centuries. And even in the face of a pandemic, more Americans voted this election than ever before in American history. Over 150 million people cast their votes. I think that's just extraordinary. And if we had any doubts, we shouldn't have any longer about a government of, by, and for the people. It's very much alive in America. Here, the people rule. Power can't be taken or asserted. It flows from the people. And it's their will that determines who will be the President of the United States, and their will alone. And now, after a long night of counting, it's clear that we're winning enough states to reach 270 electoral votes needed to win the presidency. I'm not here to declare that we've won, but I am here to report when the count is finished, we believe we will be the winners. With all the votes counted, we have won Wisconsin by 20,000 votes, virtually the same margin that President Trump won that state 4 years ago. In Michigan, we lead by over 35,000 votes, and it's growing. A substantially bigger margin than President Trump won Michigan in 2016. Michigan will complete its vote soon, maybe as early as today. And I feel very good about Pennsylvania. Virtually all the remaining ballots to be counted were cast by mail. And we've been winning 78% of the votes by mail in Pennsylvania. We flipped Arizona and the 2nd District of Nebraska. Of special significance to me is that we've won with the majority of the American people. And every indication is that that majority will grow. We have a popular vote lead of nearly 3 million votes, and every indication is that will grow as well. Indeed, Senator Harris and I are on track to win more votes than any ticket in the history of this country that ever won the presidency and vice presidency. Over 70 million votes. I'm very proud of our campaign. Only 3 presidential campaigns in the past have defeated an incumbent president. When it's finished, God willing, we'll be the 4th. This is a major achievement. This is a major achievement. And it's been a long and difficult campaign, but it's been a more difficult time for our country, a hard time. We've had hard campaigns before. We've faced hard times before. So once this election is finalized and behind us, it'll be time for us to do what we've always done as Americans, to put the harsh rhetoric of the campaign behind us, to lower the temperature, to see each other again, to listen to one another, to hear each other again, and respect and care for one another, to unite, to heal, to come together as a nation. I know this won't be easy. I'm not naive. Neither of us are. I know how deep and hard the opposing views are in our country on so many things. But I also know this as well. To make progress, we have to stop treating our opponents as enemies. We are not enemies. What brings us together as Americans is so much stronger than anything that can tear us apart. So let me be clear. We are campaigning as a Democrat, but I will govern as an American president. The presidency itself is not a partisan institution. It's the one office in this nation that represents everyone. And it demands a duty of care for all Americans. And that is precisely what I will do. I will work as hard for those who didn't vote for me as I will for those who did vote for me. Now, every vote must be counted. No one's going to take our democracy away from us. Not now, not ever. America's come too far. America's fought too many battles. America's endured too much to ever let that happen. We, the people, will not be silenced. We, the people, will not be bullied. We, the people, will not surrender. My friends, I'm confident we'll emerge victorious. But this will not be my victory alone or our victory alone. It'll be a victory for the American people, for our democracy, for America. And there will be no blue states and red states when we win, just the United States of America. God bless you all, and may God protect our troops. Thank you.
All right, you've been listening to Vice President Joe Biden. I was just kind of waiting to see if he's taking some questions from anybody there, but it doesn't seem so. He spoke for about 5 minutes, of course, Chase Center, at the Chase Center in Wilmington, Delaware. Really, I think the main message of this, saying that he is confident, he and his team, that they will remain victorious after all the states are called. He does believe that they will have those 270 votes, electoral college votes, that will give him the White House. But his point was about saying, while he might have run as a candidate, as a Democrat, that the result as president, he will be an American and he will be ruling, not ruling, I should say, but running the country for everyone. No red, no blue states, he said specifically. I also thought it was interesting that he talked about an extraordinary turnout. We've talked about that a lot here at Bloomberg, and that a lot of people came out to vote specifically. I want to bring in our Bloomberg News White House correspondent, Josh Wingrove. So Josh, Vice President Joe Biden coming out looking very cool, calm, and collected, saying he expects to be victorious, but of course awaiting the outcome like everyone else. Quick speech, 5 minutes. Why did he do that?
Because Trump is trying to declare victory in crucial swing states that look like they're about to swing to Biden. There are sort of two speeches you can give in this kind of situation. One is like, we're feeling good about our chances, we want every vote to be counted, etc. Joe Biden gave a version of that speech last night, and kind of just now, Vice President Mike Pence gave a version of that speech last night, or I guess I should say early this morning. But Trump is declaring victory, in particular states, but also accusing or putting out accusations of fraud more broadly. So the Trump campaign today declared victory in Pennsylvania, where there are still 1 million votes to be counted. Those votes are mail ballots, disproportionately from Philadelphia and Pittsburgh. They are likely to skew heavily Democrat, and they will make this a close race, if not a Biden lead in that state. Trump is suing to stop temporarily the counting of those ballots and is declaring victory in Pennsylvania. This is highly unusual. And so Biden, it seems, is coming out more or less to try to calm things down a little bit when his opponent is, with no real basis in fact, declaring victory in Pennsylvania, one of the crucial swing states. No network has called Pennsylvania. The state of Pennsylvania says it's still counting ballots. Pennsylvania is still in process. We do not know who has won it. President Trump could win it. Joe Biden could win it. We don't know. But it's all very unusual. But Biden right now needs either essentially Pennsylvania, Georgia, or Arizona. Any one of those three clinches it for Biden because he's been called as the winner of Wisconsin, and it looks like he's going to win Michigan. He's already also been called as the winner of Arizona, but the Trump campaign disputes that. So if in fact he is, then he's already won this. But the Trump campaign, as I said, thinks it will actually win Arizona.
Right. Listen, it ultimately comes down to once you have the vote count, it is what it is. Now, when there are really close elections, whether it's 0.5% or 1%, depending on the state, that is when a candidate can call for a recount, which might make the decision go on a little bit longer, correct?
Right, absolutely. So they're calling for recounts in Wisconsin, for instance, but even Scott Walker, who's an advisor to the president, doesn't think that's going to work out so well for them. I mean, Trump is calling for recounts in states where he's lost, but he's holding out for counting in states where he's trailing, like Arizona. And in states where he's winning, but there's still a bunch of ballots to be counted, he wants the ballot counting to end. So his position depends on the state that you're talking about.
Yeah, exactly. In what's already been an unusual election campaign year, it just gets a little bit funnier as each day goes by. All right, Josh, thanks so much. I know you've been a busy guy. Really appreciate checking in with you. Bloomberg News White House correspondent Josh Wingrove joining us on the phone. Now, despite all the uncertainty, or at least some uncertainty that still exists surrounding the U.S. election, some are saying there is a clear victor already, and that has to do with domestic cannabis companies. We definitely saw some of these stocks moving today, initially rallying, then we saw some selling, some concerns that it wasn't a blue wave, and that might make it a little bit tougher for the regulatory environment when it comes to cannabis. Let's see what Chris Beals has to say. He's the CEO of California-based Weed Maps. They provide tech and software used by cannabis consumers and businesses. He joins us on the phone in LA. Chris, nice to have you here with us. You've been doing this for a couple of decades, involved in this industry. Where are we in the evolution of cannabis, especially based on some of those ballot initiatives that we saw yesterday, certainly including in my home state here in New Jersey, where they passed recreational cannabis?
Yeah, thanks for having me. So,
sure.
I think really what we saw here was, I think probably kind of a landmark night in the sense that you had 5 different states pass unanimously ballot initiatives for cannabis legalization. I think it's worth noting that, while these ballot initiatives have passed, the hard part is actually still ahead, which is the states moving forward with legislation and the regulatory framework to support that.
Right.
But, that being said, I think there were fundamental messages that came out of this that I think actually implicate the shape and color in which cannabis legalization will occur moving forward. And undoubtedly, we already know New Jersey, which you specifically mentioned, it immediately puts a huge amount of pressure on New York, Connecticut, Pennsylvania, Maryland all move forward with adult use initiatives or sort of legalization regimes.
There is still, as you mentioned, a federal criminal statute against the industry. What's the likelihood that we get something done? Let's assume it is Joe Biden in the White House, but we still have a Congress that's split. I mean, what's the likelihood that we get anything done? We've been talking about, just looking at the stocks, that initially the rally because of what came out of the elections around the country, but then all of a sudden, because there were less Democrats who seemed to be more not sensitive, but more prone to be, more positive when it comes to doing some regulatory oversight, on cannabis. So I do wonder how you see it.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the messages that came out incredibly clearly last night is there is widespread bipartisan support. When you look at South Dakota and Mississippi, deeply red states, in both of those states, in Mississippi's case, you had a medical ballot initiative pass with approaching sort of the 70%, or actually over a 70% yes vote, while at the same time sort of repudiating a ballot initiative put on by the state that would have limited or crippled the size of the medical system. Conversely, you had South Dakota not just move forward with adult or medical legalization, they also moved forward with adult use legalization in the face of the governor doing no advertisements on TV and that sort of thing. So I think at this point, one thing that could not be more clear is that whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, your constituents at this point are saying, we want to do this. We saw in Oklahoma when they went forward with legalization, now 2,600 retailers in the state of Oklahoma, a deeply red state. And so, it's your question about what happens if we assume that it's sort of Biden in the White House and then sort of a red Senate. What has traditionally prevented things from moving forward in the Senate has actually been at the committee level. So if you look at things like the SAFE Act, that was Senator Crepo from a Republican from Idaho, was the chair of that committee, preventing it from moving on to a floor vote. If these things get to floor votes on the Senate, not only is there enough support once you look across the Republican and sort of Democratic caucuses, there's also the fact that with this last election that went through, you're now looking at, Republican senators who are now sitting in states, Mississippi, Oklahoma, Montana, South Dakota, that have all legalized cannabis.
So you think this year or 2021 more likely that something could potentially get done, or is it still a couple of years?
I think the power structure will be hard to see this year. I would say it's probably more likely in 2022 as sort of people sort out what's left among the ashes.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Hey, listen, great to catch up with you. Hopefully you can come back. I know we squeezed it a little bit because of Joe Biden talking and a lot going on, but hopefully we can catch up with you in the future soon. Chris, thank you so much. He is the CEO of Weed Maps, joining us on the phone from Los Angeles. And as we said, of course, it's the Senate seats, the congressional seats, it's the president, but there are a lot of issues that were on the ballot and initiatives that Americans were voting on, and that included those on the cannabis industry. I think we have now 15 states now allowing recreational cannabis and 17 allowing medicinal. You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week. I'm Carol Masser, and this is Bloomberg Radio.
Well, I'm placing a stop on profit for euro at 117.20.3. The reason I always trying to do with 0.3, 0.2, 0.1, it's just easier to collect profit. It's just round number. 1720.3, it means £200 in profit if it will go back and basically will execute this order. So 1 pip, as you can see, worth £100. So 2 pips, it's 117.18. 2 pips, 1 pip, 19. 2 pips, 20.3. So this is how it works. Okay, you can use 1 pip, £30, quite popular. 50 pounds. You can use 10 pounds. In this case, you will have just in half an hour, in 1 hour, 20 pounds profit in 1 hour. If you will use just 10 pounds, 1 pip. Okay, this is how it works.
Shares of the chipmaker now rising more than 10% in extended trading, looking at Qualcomm up now by 10.8%. MetLife's private equity investments boosted earnings above analyst expectations in the third quarter despite a sluggish economy. MetLife after hours up now by just about 1%. Stocks and bonds rallied as election bets got retooled. 10-year yield sank the most since April. Gold prices slipped today. We did see the 10-year yield at 0.76%. The Dow Jones Industrial Average up today by 367 points. That was a gain of 1.3%. S&P up 74, higher by 2.2%. And NASDAQ up 430. That was a gain of just about 3.9%. So an update on Wall Street, we saw gold fall by 0.3%. Gold down $5.73 the ounce at 1903 West Texas Intermediate crude up 3.7%, 39.05 a barrel. Mixed election results do raise the likelihood of a divided Congress, part of the reason for today's rally. Again, after the bell, we did hear from Qualcomm, delivering that upbeat forecast. Qualcomm shares up by just about 11%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thank you so much. So another election outcome trade happened today. We talked a little bit earlier and just in our last segment about the cannabis industry, but we also want to talk a little bit about the infrastructure trade. We did see steel stocks moving in today's session, taking a hit a little bit on the increasing likelihood that a Republican Senate and a Joe Biden victory will significantly dull a potential stimulus package. We've talked a lot about that over the last few hours. Let's get more, though, on this. Great to have back with us is Sean McCarthy, Managing Director and CEO at BAM, Build America Mutual. He joins us on the phone in New York City. Sean, it's been a couple of years, but it's nice to check in with you again. How are you?
Carol, I'm really well, thank you. Thank you for having me on the program this afternoon.
Well, it's great to have you here. I know it's been a nutty year, a tough year to say the least, but here we are the day after the election. We're still watching some headlines cross when it comes to some of the states specifically. What do you think, though, ultimately will be the election impact when it comes to something like infrastructure or the amount of stimulus that even states and municipalities can do on infrastructure programs?
So, it's interesting. Infrastructure starts at the state and local government level. And on the ballot yesterday, nationwide, there were $45 billion worth of initiatives for infrastructure projects. The vast majority of those were approved. Mm-hmm. So that's a good sign, particularly since the voters are nationwide experiencing COVID, and so there's been a lot of stresses on municipalities themselves. In Congress, the issue is going to be, will there be an infrastructure package going forward with the Senate, and whether Biden is the president or Trump continues to be the president. I think the issue is that there'll be some level of support. Already, Senator McConnell has indicated that he intends to have some level of stimulus. And whenever the election finally comes down, one way or the other, I think there'll be some level of stimulus that goes to address some of the stresses that are at the state and local level.
So what does it mean for your world and opportunities for investors as a result?
So it's interesting, the bond insurance this year in the municipal market has had record volume. Insured bond sales have been up almost 60% year to date. And that's growing at a level that's twice as fast as the overall market. Now, what I see happening is that essential public purpose, so if you think about schools, roads, water and sewer utilities, they've all been actually pretty durable through this issue. But the reason people are focused on bond insurance, if you think about it, is it preserves, not only does it protect you against default, but it preserves value in your portfolio. Because we have a stable ratings as an industry. So if you think about what decisions you're making right now for your municipal bond portfolio, those decisions need to be made one issuer at a time. They're not all the same.
Well, that's kind of interesting. And I do wonder, because, I think, Sean, going into this, we've talked so much here at Bloomberg about what's going on, certainly on the state level and on the city level, of just being strapped because of COVID-19 and not seeing the kind of, tax base come in that they were used to or that they were accustomed to or were forecasting before the pandemic hit. And I do wonder, if, despite what we saw in the election, how that might continue, though, to put some pressure on some of those projects and those issues.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a very good point. So I think it differs depending on the kinds of transactions you have. So, for example, if you've got an issuer that has a broad tax base that's based on sales tax, they're doing pretty well. If you take it at the other extreme, if you take a convention center, for example, where there aren't any events right now, or use-based revenue streams that would be more susceptible to volatility of not being used. And so if you have to look at what the revenue streams are going forward. I'd say right now that, mass transit, for example, is experiencing some stress. Why is it experiencing that? People aren't taking the subway. So these are the issues you have to look at in order to ascertain whether a credit has good stability underneath or not. And, that's basically what we do for a living, and then we guarantee the ones that we think are worthy.
I think when we talked last time and we talked with some members of your team, I mean, just this whole idea of, this is one of those issues, just generally speaking, infrastructure, everyone agrees that there needs to be the spending happening, and it's whether you're red or blue politically, and yet it just takes so much to get it done. It just feels like when it comes to pulling the lever, people just don't do it.
It's funny. There's two. You have to think about infrastructure at two levels. At the federal level, so if you think I-95, really big projects like that, that's done at the federal level, and I think that that's where Congress needs to sort of step in and provide support. But when you look around at wherever you live, cities or states or small localities, infrastructure is done at the state and local level. You vote on a new school that's going to be built. You approve a new water treatment plant in your neighborhood, and those are paid from your taxes. So that essence of granular public finance or infrastructure financing is done by the cities and states and counties that you live in. And that's why when I point out the $45 billion worth of voter initiatives, for example, California approved a $7 billion program for improving their schools.
Sean, hang on a second. We're going to come back to some news and we'll continue the conversation. Right now, though, got to go to World and National News and Nancy Lyons. Hey, Nance.
Hey, Carol. Joe Biden is sounding extremely hopeful about the outcome of the election.
And now, after a long night of counting, it's clear that we're winning enough states to reach 270 electoral votes needed to win the presidency. I'm not here to declare that we've won, but I am here to report when the count is finished, we believe we will be the winners.
Well, the Trump campaign is not ready to declare defeat. It is demanding an immediate recount in Wisconsin, which Trump narrowly won in 2016. And the Trump camp has also filed lawsuits in Michigan and Pennsylvania saying the counts in both states should be stopped. They allege the counting process has not been sufficiently transparent. Well, the presidential race has turned out to be closer than the polls predicted, and that's raising some questions about the polling process. Bloomberg's Irv Chapman reports.
His poll did forecast a tight race, John Zogby said in a Bloomberg interview.
You had several polls going into Election Day still oversampling Democrats, not only in national elections, but in states as well. And they're going to have to overhaul their methodology. So it's not so much the predictability factor as it is, are we pointing to trends that we should be watching?
Zogby said he now uses internet polling since 94% of likely voters now have internet access. In Washington, Irv Chapman, Bloomberg Radio.
Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Nancy Lyons.
All right, Nancy, thank you so much. You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week. Carol Master along with Charlie Pellet. Charlie, a couple of stories that caught our attention when it comes to the travel world and hospitality. And one of them had to do with basically if you're looking to, looking for a lockdown-free vacation, this one talks about head to the beach. And there's some these are like the kind of deals you're interested in.
You know what? This so resonated. I asked my wife Thanksgiving, do we go to the family or do we go away to Mexico, Cozumel? And you know what? I actually booked a hotel at a really swanky resort in Cancun. The airfare down there was like $215 round trip. The hotel at a super swanky resort was like $210 a night. Are we going? Absolutely not. Why? Because all of the restrictions, you've got corporate policies, you've got local rules, so tempting, and yet you just can't go.
Right, exactly. And I mean, it's interesting because some people are saying, you know what, if I stay in my home state, it's as much risk if I get on a plane and go. You've got to really look at the numbers, look at where the COVID cases are, look on, the rates of virus transmission aboard planes. I've been talking with folks in the airline industry. They've been doing a lot of things to make sure passengers, their touch points on a plane are really controlled and careful and safe, but it's kind of interesting. In the meantime, another story on the Bloomberg talks about UK flights. Airlines have been slashing capacity on UK routes, the country getting ready for that second coronavirus lockdown that will outlaw all non-business trips.
And the beneficiaries of that, Carol Master?
What?
Private jet operators. I was scanning the story to see if the name Master Family came up there for the private jets to get you around, but it did not. But, if you can't fly commercial, a lot of people say, hey, private jets, that's the way to go.
Listen, we've talked to some of them, and they said, that they were definitely seeing an uptick over the summer where, families and individuals were, popping on some of those private jets. And that whole idea of touch points, that if you go on a private jet, the touch points are a lot less versus a commercial jet. And that all has to do with, the more times that you could possibly get infected. You're listening to Bloomberg.
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet, continuing to keep an eye on Qualcomm shares after hours. Qualcomm did deliver an upbeat forecast for the current quarter, suggesting new 5G wireless networks are persuading consumers to upgrade their smartphones. Qualcomm shares after hours trading higher now by just about 10.5%. An update on Wall Street with the Dow, the S&P, and NASDAQ all advancing. The 10-year yield sinking the most since April. Gold prices slipped. Mixed election results raising the likelihood of a divided Congress. We got the S&P up 74 today, a gain there of 2.2%. The Dow up 367, up 1.3%. NASDAQ up 430, up 3.9%. 10-year yield 0.76%. Gold down 0.3%, 1903 the ounce, and West Texas Intermediate crude up 3.7%, 39.03 a barrel. Everybody's exhausted today, staying up late to watch the election last night. Turns out just over 50 million TV viewers tuned in to watch returns on major American TV networks last night. That, however, was a decline from 4 years ago, may reflect voter exhaustion and the lack of a clear winner. I'm Charlie Pellet. That's the Bloomberg Business Flash.
Or, Charlie, people watching those wrong YouTube feeds.
We were talking about that. That's part of that, too. Exactly.
All right, Charlie Pellet, appreciate that. Want to get back to our guest. Still with us is Sean McCarthy, Managing Director and CEO at BAM, Build America Mutual, on the phone from New York City. Sean, I think it's really important how you made the distinction between infrastructure, whether it's at the federal level, and how much is done at the city and state, local levels. What I do wonder is, though, how does possibly federal tax policy, whether it's investors being targeted or so on and so forth, how that might impact how people view tax-exempt muni bonds and maybe either being more interesting or not?
So, great question. Two things to think about. The higher your tax rate, the more you're motivated to invest in municipal bonds.
Right.
And so if there's an income tax increase, it would have a natural demand pull towards the municipal bond market. This year, and what they project for next year, is that the market will have a 35% of the market will be in taxable municipal bonds, and those are being bought internationally as well as in the United States. That's a very different dynamic than it was, let's say, 5 or 10 years ago. And one of those things that's happening is that because municipalities are looking to refinance and lower their cost of debt, they're accessing the international markets as well as the domestic tax-exempt markets to do that.
That's interesting. Hey, one thing I wanted to ask, and I was going to do it at the top, but I do wonder, Sean, I mean, this has been a year like no other, because of COVID, because of, unearthing of, kind of all the inequities that are in our world. And we've seen an interesting financial market, a lot of volatility. How do you see the rest of the world kind of playing out, or the rest of the year playing out? And what kind of visibility do you feel like you've got going into 2021?
I think when you're looking at two things, I think COVID and its impact economically is the primary driver for what's going to happen and how much risk is going to be, felt by state and local governments across the nation. So economic activity is key. And so, one of the things at BAM that we focus on is essentiality of the infrastructure. So, for example, a school that's being funded by a tax base is more likely to be repaid in a more secure investment than, let's say, a municipal golf course.
Mm-hmm.
Which, not that golf courses aren't great, but they're not quite as essential.
Right.
So you have to look at really where things are going to, exhibit stress. Water and sewer, for example. If people even in the crisis are going to pay their water bill. So that's a more durable issue. Other issues on the other side is, as we talked about before, mass transit, toll roads. Different, private colleges right now are having some stress put on them, and all those things you have to look at. What is the revenue stream behind that issue, and how to analyze it and how to protect yourselves. At BAM, we have a tremendous number of financial analysts, and what they do every day is is look at that strength, and then to the extent that we can make sure that we're comfortable with it, we put our AA guarantee on top of that bond so that the investor knows that not only are they getting a solid underlying municipal bond, but they're also getting our guarantee in the event that there is an issue.
One last question. Your analysts, are they anticipating 2021 is a better year?
You know, I think it's going to be a pretty high volume year at the state and local level would be, you know, our consensus. But the issue is going to be how, you know, the people at the very granular level are focused on improving, not only building new schools and better roads, but improving the infrastructure that's there. And so I think, you know, the burden is at the most granular level. You know, we hope that, you know, Congress comes in and focuses on a sweeping infrastructure bill, which has been something that's been discussed really for the last, you know, 4 or 5 years. It needs to be done. Because that's going to be the linchpin for some of what people think of as larger infrastructure projects nationwide.
Well, we will certainly see what happens. Interesting times, though. Hey, great to check in with you. Really topical and timely, considering all of the election outcome. Sean, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Sean McCarthy, Managing Director, CEO at BAM, on the phone in New York City. All right, kind of want to wrap up with how we started. A lot of news. Bloomberg News, global macro strategist Vince Signorella is back with us on the phone in White Plains. We've had some headlines since we first talked at 2 p.m.
Just a few here and there. Just a few here and there, yeah.
So what's kind of coming across the blog? I'm just curious, you know, what people are talking about.
Well, you know, I'm going to give myself a small pat on the back because we said this rally didn't look like it was going to hold, and the markets gave back half of their gains between the time we first spoke and now. Just in case no one was listening earlier to me anyway.
Everybody's listening, always, always.
We may get Nevada tonight. A local affiliate in Vegas basically said so many people are interested in the count in Nevada, they were going to try to get it done this evening. So obviously, if Arizona stays in the count for Biden, that would get him to 270, and the contention over this should be over, barring the lawsuits, et cetera, et cetera. But on December 1st, the states do certify their election results. So at the latest, one would hope that's the date where we would basically put a stamp on it.
Right, which is what happens every major election. That's how it works.
Correct.
That's how it works officially. Well, I did wonder, you know, if there's nervousness at all about some of the lawsuits. We know the president has taken legal action in Pennsylvania. He looked to stop the vote in Michigan. So is that any kind of conversations that people are having about that increased nervousness, or not necessarily?
No. Traders don't put any weight on those at all. They know it's kind of just it's something that was expected. It's something that Trump had threatened. There's no real reason to believe any of those lawsuits have any merit from anyone I've spoken to, and no one's really given it much credence. I mean, the only thing that what they're really worried about now is how Arizona plays out, because it was put in Biden's camp, and that does take him to 270 if he holds Arizona.
Right.
But if Arizona flips back to Trump, then Pennsylvania becomes the key state. But Democratic officials have privately told Biden, apparently, that the count that's remaining in Pennsylvania are Democratic strongholds, and they think he's going to win the state anyway. So
Right, it's a lot of the mail-ins, the early voting.
Yeah. And so I think the market's pretty much come to grips with the idea that it looks like Biden will be president, the Senate will stay Republican, the House a smaller Democratic field, but that gridlock, which people like to see in Washington.
We're going to see more of it. All right, got to leave it on that note. Vince Signorella, thank you so much, our global macro strategist, joining us just to wrap up an interesting day here at Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio.
Well, we closed position on euro at 117.203. So we have £200 in profit. And also, I'll see you tomorrow, guys. Okay, have a great evening. And please don't forget to switch on our channel from 8 o'clock tomorrow UK time. Okay, have a great evening. Bye-bye.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. We begin with a look at Qualcomm. Shares surging after hours, up now by 13.5%. Qualcomm delivered an upbeat forecast for the current quarter, suggesting new 5G wireless networks are persuading consumers to upgrade their smartphones. Again, Qualcomm up now by 13%. Also reporting earnings after the closing bell, MetLife, its private equity investments, boosted earnings above analyst expectations in the third quarter. Despite a sluggish economy, MetLife is the biggest American life insurer. Shares down by 0.2%. An update on Wall Street, the Dow, the S&P, and NASDAQ all rallied today. Investors frantically bidding up stocks, sending major averages to the biggest rallies in 5 months as they grew more confident that the tightly contested outcome will ensure key elements of the bull market remain intact for years to come. Close contests in key states mean the election may not be decided for days, so what might that mean for markets? Jim Bianco is